Fractal Design Torrent is a large PC case that supports eATX and those SSI form factors that go beyond eATX, and it sells in the UK for £165 or 190 US dollars. Available in black, grey or white, as you can see here, with the varying degrees of tint on the glass. This white is clear. There's also a black version with a solid side panel, which is slightly cheaper at £156, but the same $190, curiously. There's also a black version with RGB fans, which is £200 or $230. And I'm not sure at this moment whether I'd quite have liked to see that version, but here we go. We've got white with tempered glass. However, the tempered glass is just a sideshow. Got a couple of key features. In the front we have a pair of 180mm fans. In the floor we have three 140 fans. Power supply goes in the roof. This cover is plastic. You can see the honeycomb stiffening on the inside. It's rigid. It matches the rest of the case, and yet for some reason my immediate instinct is to dislike it, which is entirely illogical. And there we have the power supply compartment in the roof. Obviously with the cover on, this is all covered over, which suggests the exhaust airflow is to the rear. Turn the case around, solid rear cover. The number of times I've complained about having glass on the rear for absolutely no reason. Here we go, this is absolutely fine by me. And there we have a relatively slender compartment for cable management and also for drives. 4 SSD sleds, 2 full hard drive sleds, and all the cables going there. I mean, wow, that looks like a challenge. Here we have an included PWM fan hub. There's an awful lot going on inside the back cover there, and it strikes me at first glance as though Fractal might have given us another 5 or maybe even 10mm to work with, but because of the 180mm fans, it's already a very wide chassis. Front panel comes off in one unit. Hefty great big thing. I don't yet know whether these vanes are to guide air or if they're just purely a styling trick. And on the inside we have a dust filter. Pull it up and away it comes. I've never seen a front panel like that. Full-length dust filter on the underside. So to get to this, I first have to remove the front panel. And here we go. Now we're getting down to the nuts and bolts. And out with the bottom radiator fan rag. So now you can see the bottom is completely open. At the front, we've got these plates. When I go to the accessory pack, well, you can actually read for yourself. Torrent Fan Brackets contains these. And the idea is if you want to switch from the 180s to 120 or 140s, you remove the fans, take off these plates and install these mounts instead. Which makes a certain amount of sense. Trying to have a front that could accommodate 120, 140 and 180 means you're inevitably going to have a whole load of metal hanging over your 180 fans. So it's 180 or 120, 140. I suppose purists would say can we have brackets for 180 and brackets for 140 and brackets for 120. The various options we're shown by Fractal show us you can have 2 180s in the floor or 3 120s, 3 140s, or 2 180s in the front or 3 120s, 3 140s. And it so happens that Fractal had sent me a pair of Prisma PWM RGB fans. These sell for £37 each here in the UK or £65 for a twin pack. At the moment my thinking is to keep the 140s in the floor and possibly swap out the front fans for the RGB, and I need to have a little think about putting a fan in the rear, because right now this space here without a fan strikes me as odd, to say the least. CPU cooling, obviously an air tower, no problem whatsoever, got all the space in the world. An all-in-one cooler, bearing in mind Fractal uses Ace-Tech coolers. You can mount a radiator in the front or the floor. Ace-Tech, you don't want to have the pump at the top of the loop, therefore that would have to go in the front. And that's going to A, look a bit peculiar, and B, you've got the 180 fans at the moment, so you've been moving a load of hardware around. Putting a custom loop in this case, you could put a rad at the front, rad in the floor. Now here's the thing, we've got support for up to 420mm radiators. Let's put the fan rack back in. So this is 3 Bowl 40s. As you can see, the fans are currently towards the rear of the rack. You've got that amount of space there, about 15mm. So these fans could move forward. If I take this 420 Alpha Cool, i.e. a completely conventional 420 rad, give you a good view, slide it in, tank to the rear, that ain't going to go because of these brackets. Switch it around, same deal. If I was to mount the fans in pull, so the rad was going in the floor of the case and sliding under there, that could work with the fans pushed forward, I think, just. But I would have... I think theoretically this radiator goes in the case, but connecting at either end is just going to be... I'm going to say actually impossible, but certainly very difficult. So 420 in there, tricky. If I take a 280, bearing in mind working units are 140, that could work. Possibly that could work. Again, I can slide the fans around. So support for radiators at the moment is looking a bit questionable actually. I mean, as in, I can certainly put radiators in, but putting the correct radiator in either the floor or the front in the position I want, despite the fact I've got a huge amount of space, I think will be slightly more difficult than it first appears. Also, this area here is designated for pump reservoir mounting. If I take this EK Quantum Kinetic, I mean, it fits in that area, but those mounting slots bear no relation to the hardware. But right now, Fractal specification and the practicalities of installing hardware may not necessarily add up. It's also worth noting we've got here some openings where you can add a fill port. So if you're going custom loop, they're helping you out with hardware up there. So there's absolutely no doubt in my mind Fractal's given the cooling side of things some thought. I'm just not sure how successful they've been. Let's try this. So we've got the fans pulled forward on the bottom rack, got 280mm Alpha Cool rad installed. Rear fan, and let's lose those black fans at the front. I often wonder whether fans are overpriced. These 180s that are coming out are chunky great big fellas. These RGB fans going in are precisely the same size, but somehow it just feels as though you're getting more for your money. I mean, 65 quid for 2 fans, don't get me wrong, it's a lot. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how these behave once they're up and running. Also, I'm liking these braided cables. The standard licorice jobs, less so. So we've obviously got PWM cables and RGB cables. But don't forget PWM fan hub. Something at the rear. It's a Fantex, but it looks the part. Seasonic Prime Titanium 850 watt, fully modular power supply in the roof of the case. I guess we want it fan down. In fact, I'm not guessing at all. Of course I want it fan down. The top of the case is going to be covered, so this is how it's going to breathe. It's really unusual cable routing, but it does make sense, and Fractal has made a point of adding these Velcro straps all over the shop. So while it's all A bit horrible around the back at the moment. I have every confidence it's going to come right. Motherboard, Asus TUF Gaming X570 Plus. Processor, Ryzen 9 3900X. We've got a Sabrent Rocket 4.0 SSD. Trident Z Neo memory rated at 3600. And here we have an EK Quantum Magnitude CPU block. But before that goes on, a little dollop of Arctic MX5. Behold. And then on with this lovely piece of nickel hardware. And then 4 screws to lock it down. That's getting there. Palette RTX 3080 with EK Quantum full nickel graphics block and backplate. We've got the tube reservoir D5 pump up the front. A slightly bizarre snake of fittings to connect the pump to the radiator. Just got to put in some tubing and we've got a cooling loop. Looks like we've got a loop. What colour shall we choose for the coolant? Still thinking. The PC lives. I've got the lights down so you can enjoy the RGB. I'm going to run some thermal tests and then I'll wrap up the review. I'm going to leave the lights down low while I wrap this one up so you can have a bit of an RGB show while you listen to my dulcet tones. The cooling with a combination of Cinebench R23 and TimeSpy stress test was perfectly decent. The Ryzen 9 ran at a shade under 80 degrees, 79.5. The GPU went up to 51 degrees. AMD basically pummels their CPUs in a sort of mix of power, clock speed and cooling. You've got excellent cooling here, so it just keeps on going, and that just under 80 degrees thing is tip top. The GPU running at 51 degrees is impressive because you're talking about 275 watts of board power. The wall socket, it was bouncing around 480, 490, 520, depending on which part of the test run we're at. Call it 500 for round money. So the load was significant. The case handled it without any difficulty. Of course, the cooling hardware is top quality. So cooling, which after all, the name Torrent is all about the torrent of cooling air. Yep, it delivers, and thank goodness for that. Let's go over the pros and cons. Pros: effective cooling. The price. Now admittedly I've cheated, I'm showing you the RGB fans in the front that don't come with this case, but I made that clear up front. Also worth mentioning, the RGB in the side here is part of the case. Funnily enough, Fractal actually says in the bump that we reviewers get, if you don't like the RGB you can always disconnect the lighting strip, which is quite a novel approach. I applaud them for offering that choice. So price. The fact you've got those huge filters in the front and the bottom is good, and novel design because many of you are looking for something different. There are after all a great many cases that are variants on the box, so the fact we've got the airflow going up, we've got this top cover power supply up top, air clearly coming out the back, positive pressure is what this case is all about. Novel design is going to win over some people, and I fully understand that, so that's on the pros. Cons: space for cables. I mentioned this up front. I've been proven correct. I'll show you in a moment. No rear fan. I'm not actually certain a rear fan is necessary. Positive air pressure theoretically will drive air out. It just seems a bit bizarre to me. We've got hulking great big 180s at the front, 3 140s in the floor. We have got positive air pressure. They show a fan as one of the options for builds. So why not include a fan? And finally, plasticky build. This top cover feels a bit meh, and there are panels on the bottom similarly. It's a minor quibble, and it's not a problem. It's just my immediate gut reaction. I said it when I took the top cover off, and I finished up feeling that way. But that's a detail. The cable management is absolutely the biggest issue. We'll bring up lights, and I'll show you what's going on around the back. I've actually taped the panel closed. When I first looked at this case, I thought cable management would be problematic, and I think I've been proven correct. Thing is, this case supports 2 full hard drives and 4 SSDs. And how? I mean, how are you going to get all those drives in there along with the extra cables required for the drives and hope to manage your cables? It requires more space. The absolute minimum, the panel requires a positive lock. Once you've got it closed, screw it down. But another 10 mil of space would have made a lot of difference. That is problematic. I haven't done anything too extreme with this build, and just look at it. So there we have it. Bit of a shame that, but overall Torrent, I like it. It's worth buying. It's an 8 out of 10.